I'm head of personnel and communications for the Dundee site. What I'm going to talk about today is a brief introduction to Michelin as an organisation. Then think about the structure of our modern apprenticeship programme, and then what are the key elements that we use to ensure that on-the-job learning is effective, and then think about what's in it for us as the employer, and then have a conclusion. I'll stop at various points in the presentation and see if we need to go through any questions, but please just type into the chat box as questions arise. So in terms of the Michelin Group, it's a world major tire industry player. It's got 15% of the market share, either number one or number two, depending on what you look at and how you measure it. It's got a global sales of about 21 billion euros and operates across 170 countries. The last time I counted up, I got to about 85 countries and then got stuck. So it's got a presence in lots of different places. An interesting thing about it is the first language is French. It would describe itself at the moment as a multinational company based in France, but the first language is French, and we're all sort of expected to speak in French on various subjects. In terms of production sites, there are 69 plants in 18 different countries, and we produce all sorts of different tires, from a cycle tire to stuff that used to go on the space shuttle. And the mission is to facilitate mobility. So the other part of the business is maps and guides business that people may or may not have heard of. We've got a highly qualified staff, about 113,000 of all backgrounds and cultures, and then 6,000 people in the group's R&D part. So it's quite varied, big organisation. In terms of if we come closer to home in the UK, there are 3 centres. We've got us in Dundee, we make car tyres. Ballymena, which people may have seen in the press recently, they've announced the closure of that in 2018, 2019. They make truck tyres. And Stoke-on-Trent, they make they retread truck tyres, and they have the UK headquarters. Our sort of selling arm of the business is called ATS Euromaster. You may or may not have heard of it, and that's a sort of an outfit similar to QuickFit, similar in size in terms of headcount to Michelin, but different in terms of value. So that's us in the UK. If we then come to Dundee, we're on the northeast corner of Dundee. You can perhaps see the Tay Bridges there in the background. We've been here for the last 43 years and currently employing about 850 people. So the answer to the poll was C, 850 employees. In terms of what we're putting into the local economy, probably £45 million in terms of direct purchases and salaries. We've got a large site. You can see the perimeter is shown by the fat white line. Okay, and then we have a training centre down in the bottom left-hand corner of that. At the moment, the site is currently undergoing an investment program, which includes an expansion of our range of car tyres, modernisation of our equipment, and the building of a big new warehouse. So we're currently busy spending £55 million, which is exciting times. We've got 2 wind turbines that you can see there. They produce 2 megawatt of power, so when the wind's blowing in the right direction, it can take the full load of the plant. When the plant's not going, then we also export it to the grid. In terms of, we have an apprentice training centre. We've basically trained about 415 apprentices in the last 43 years. And we also train apprentices for other companies, and I'll go on and talk about that in a second. So we've had about 140 other apprentices come through the doors. We've got about 64 apprentices in our scheme today, and the external apprentices are with us on a not-for-profit basis. So we aim to cover our costs, if you like, and not to make a profit on that. Before we go into the detail of the scheme, does anyone have sort of particular questions on Michelin or what we've talked about so far? In terms of our recruitment last year in 2015 was in line with our investment program. So we recruited 100 new people last year, mainly production operators who will work on the shift system making tyres. We recruited a small number of specialists in our managerial technical team. In terms of from a pure recruitment point of view, production operators we can choose. We never have to advertise. People come to us every day to say, please can I work for you? We're in the lucky position to be an aspirational employer locally, so we don't have a challenge in that area. What we've been trying to do recently is diversify the profile of our production employees, and that has brought all sorts of different opportunities and challenges, ergonomic adjustments, etc., to try and make our positions more accessible. So that's been an area that we've been focusing on for the last sort of 4 or 5 years, but with the opportunities last year, sort of done more work on it. From an engineering point of view, until very recently, people will understand the sort of relative position of us versus oil and gas. We're 40 minutes to an hour and a half away from some significant players in the oil and gas sector. So from time to time, we have had issues with oil companies who can pay more money attracting our staff. Recently that hasn't been the case. We've got a different offering. The guys that are employed in that sort of category quite like the stability of not going offshore, quite like the stability of working in Dundee as opposed to in the South China Sea. Recently that has slightly been turned around, but that's always our challenge, is to remain competitive as an employer of good engineers. We have a small recruitment program every year of relatively inexperienced new graduates, and again that goes in cycles, but recently we've been successful in attracting some high caliber candidates. Our apprentice training school is full, and again we don't have a particular problem attracting the talent. I would say that if we do have a challenge, it's in the area of specific skills, specific shortages, and it's attracting people to live in Dundee rather than attracting people to us. There seems to be a perception with some people that Dundee's not a great place to live. I think it's brilliant. The structure of our current setup, so we've got 64 apprentices in our scheme. The table here is by year. So we've got 5 Michelin apprentices, and 7 what we call external apprentices being trained from our centre, and then a number in each year to 4th year. So we're training for external companies, so National Oil Wales, Varco, ATMRC, Two Sisters, Mighty, Finesse, NHS, SP Technology, Dundee University, DC Thompson, Forth Ports. So there are some big names on there, and also some quite small operations. Some of them we've worked with for a number of years. Some of them are relatively new to us. We do this because we've got the space, so we've got the facilities, and we've got the expertise, and it gives a good sort of blended mix to each year group. So within the 18 people in second year, we have the people that are going to work with us hopefully for a considerable period, and then other people that will work throughout, so Tayside, Fife, and hopefully they will develop their skills from each other as well as through the sort of more structured routes. If we then have a look at what we do each year, so our first year is based at our training centre, our training school, and the core skills for both parties look at theoretical learning in a safe environment. And when I say safe, what I mean is it's possible to make mistakes, and they will be supported. Some of the external apprentices return to their employers for their learning outside of the modules. So it just depends on what the individual arrangement is with each of the employers, will depend on how long the individual modern apprentice is at the training centre each year. As well as their core skills and the theoretical learning, it's built up in modules. We look at their specific competencies, what they need to know for that module, but also their behaviours and their work ethic. Because 4 years in investment is quite a long time for anybody, then we need to look at beyond the can they fix this, or can they replace that, or do they understand that. It's how they apply that knowledge is as important, and how they apply themselves to work. So the first 2 years are based from out of the training centre, and it's a controlled environment. If we just skip down to the bottom row of the table, the point I'm making here is the apprentices are also on day release to Dundee College to achieve an HNC, and they're currently achieving that after 2 years. So they go on, depending on the arrangement, on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and they do their college-based learning and should end up with their HNC. We then nip back up in year 3. What happens is they either rotate through our factory departments, or they go to their employer to do the same thing, and they work through their logbook. And this is very much about on-the-job learning via a mentor, or what in old money was called a journeyman. At every point during this, they are reviewed by the training instructor, with the mentor, with the manager of that area potentially, to check that they are learning, to check that their logbook is progressing, and that they are able to keep up with the skills expectation. Throughout their learning, the modern apprentice has what we call end tests for Michelin, and other employers have similar things which basically validate the knowledge. So they simulate the requirements of a fully qualified engineer, and they would test that in stages. And then ultimately, to achieve the modern apprenticeship status, the candidates need to have an HNC SVQ3 and achieve the 5 core skills. So that journey happens over 4 years and is very much controlled, and it is very much using a sort of a looping methodology. The instructor and the mentor working with the modern apprentice to validate that what they learn in the classroom is applied on the job, and that the individual is able to practice those skills and illustrate that they can put into use their learning, if you like. So how do we monitor that? What's the on-the-job learning monitoring system? So each apprentice is paired with a mentor or a journeyman. We would describe this as an experienced engineer. At the moment, we're only doing what we would call multi-skilled engineering apprenticeships. We're looking at our first business administration apprenticeship this year. The job of the mentor is to show them the reality, what an engineer can face every day. They act as the mentor, the coach, the supervisor, and to illustrate to the candidate that not everything goes by the book, and if it doesn't go by the book, then how do we do things safely? And really, in our sort of speak, we would see this as the difference between what's planned and what's unplanned. The analogy that you could use is if you take your car for a service in the garage, the service technician knows what is going to happen. If the car breaks down, then you don't know what you're going to do. So this is the difference between a controlled environment and a breakdown environment. And that's one of the key parts that the mentor plays, is how he can facilitate the on-the-job learning of the uncontrolled situation, how every situation the modern apprentice can take something out of it. They work through their logbook and they expose the apprentice to specific learning points, fault finding, diagnostic skills, that sort of thing.
Hello Donald, it's Gary here. I'm just picking up a question by Stuart Hardy, and he's asking, have your mentors been through any formal training to help develop the apprentices?
Some of them have and some of them haven't. In terms of, we have a criteria, if you like, that we use to select that individual. So they have to be able to be a role model. So that would be the prerequisite. So they would have to be universally recognized as a role model. So somebody that would be aspirational. So if we were looking at our employee base, yes, you know, that person has all the right behavioral traits, so the right work ethic, the right understanding, the right manner, the right interpersonal skills. So that would be the first bit. So if the answer to that question is yes, then we have had a series of training courses that we have put people through to equip them to train out specific skills. So we would naturally marry up an apprentice with that person if we could. Okay, so it's not deliberate, so we haven't said, right, every mentor needs to have this training, but a lot of our mentors have had that training. We call it train the trainer. So it's the ability to communicate, to instruct, to facilitate learning, and we do a sort of a 3-day module on it. And as we evolve, more people will go through that, and that training will become more cultural, if you like. Does that answer the question?
I'm sure it does, Donald. And there's a really interesting question come in from Stephen Miller, and it's a gender question. And Stephen asks, how many of the apprentices are female?
Okay, in each year group, we usually have about 1 out of 6, so that's about 15-16%, and that's been the case for the last, I don't know, 5-10 years. So there aren't many years without a female in it. Manufacturing statistically doesn't attract a lot of female recruits. We, as I said earlier on, we're trying to break that down. We had a big recruitment exercise last year, and basically had 50% female recruitment rate in our apprentice cohort. It's not as high as that, but that's for no reason other than applicants. We pick the strongest applicants, so we welcome everybody.
Thanks, Donald.
Okay.
That's very clear. I'll let you move on.
Okay, so going back to the points about the logbook, directs the individual and exposes them to specific learning points, i.e. they must demonstrate fault finding, they must demonstrate a 2-stage diagnostic process, etc. So in the logbook there are certain things that the individual must follow. He will go through that with his mentor, he will go through that with his instructor, and basically ensure that all areas of the curriculum, if we can call it that, are covered. If we then look at the monitoring of this, this is coordinated by our training centre instructors. So we've got 3 training centre instructors, and they are assigned individuals, and they are specifically trained, and they have got a skill set that's slightly different to our managers or our mentors stroke journeymen. They're looking at the progress and the performance of the modern apprentices, and they will then review them with the host manager, for want of a better title, and the instructor. So the instructor coordinates or tracks the progress through the logbook, and at each interval, if you like, will sit down with whoever the modern apprentice is working with and talk about their progress. And I'll show you some of the documentation that we use in a second. And again, going back to the point, they're looking at their work ethic, their attention to detail, their behavioural traits, their learning skills, their life skills, as well as their competencies, as well as the specific points of engineering that we ask them to learn about. So it's this combination of things that they're looking at. But to improve and progress, the feedback loop is critical. So unless this is facilitated by the employer, then the modern apprentice doesn't have the opportunity to learn. So the feedback loop is critical to moving on. So if we take a core skill like a diagnostic fault, that will be recorded in the logbook. It will be a skill, if you like, or a part of one of the modules that they will aspire to achieve. And the instructor's part is to make sure that learning has been completed, and that's only possible with the periodic review, with the periodic assessment, and it's formal, and it's every 3 to 6 weeks, depending on what the module is. It's either at the training school in year 1 and 2, or years 3 and 4 for Michelin apprentices, and then all the way through for external ones at their place of work. So our instructor will go to the place of work and carry out that. Feedback process. So what we have here is just a feedback sheet. It's not particularly clear. We use the SDS sheet for external apprentices. The Michelin apprentice sheet is similar. It looks at a set of criteria down the left-hand side, and then a standard against those criteria. The highlighted box indicates where the individual will sit, and then there's a free text box at the bottom for both the supervisor and the interviewee or the apprentice to put in the comments. One of the key points here is in our busy lives to make sure that this takes place is to make the process as straightforward as possible. So for feedback to be effective, it needs to be regular, it needs to be complete. So we need to make it easy for the person doing the feedback to complete it. If they are already a manager of 30 people and have got a 24/7 operation to look after, then maybe apprentice feedback is not top of the list. So we need to make it so it's easy so it gets done. Because if it doesn't get done, then the modern apprentice will miss out on that feedback. So hence the rather standard approach, but it enables both the individual and the host to keep track of what's going on. Okay, while we're talking about modern apprenticeships, there are some unmeasured features that the people in our training centre would very clearly sort of say are important. The first point would be that it's a vocational qualification and people need to want to do it. So the people that succeed are the ones that want to do it. And what I mean by that is that there has to be a draw, there has to be an attraction, there has to be I want to come to work. So the enjoyment and the engagement part of the experience. Two of our current instructors are ex-apprentices, and they still refer to their year group and their learning that they had during their time in the training centre as being significant and formative. A lot of the candidates will keep in close contact with their year group for a long time for the duration of their careers. Another important element is team building. So early on they're given responsibility for running the centre. So the sort of the day-to-day operation, they have specific tasks that they're expected to take on board to ensure that the training centre is run efficiently. Going back to the point about French in first and second year, they're taught French, so this is the external apprentices as well. This takes them away from engineering, but it reminds people that they're working for a multinational. They could be confronted with a machine or a person that's only communicating in French, and they need to be able to understand that. Another element is we have PE. Again, a break from the sort of the core curriculum, but there's also sort of a well-being aspect to it, the requirement to be fit for life. We work shifts, we work 12-hour shifts, so people need to be fit. They need to be able to face the physical and mental challenge that brings. Every year we run an apprentice camp, which is an outward bound type expedition which has a focus on life skills and leadership. So basically the apprentice group will with appropriate instructors do a traverse of the Cairngorms or something like that. And my final point would be the friendships and relationships bond the young people together and create a sense of team that's with them for the duration of their career. And it's really going to the main point, which is work can be fun. I know that sometimes in our very busy, hectic, task-driven lives we sometimes see fun as being a faraway thing, but part of the modern apprenticeship thing is to instill a sort of a positive experience so that people are engaged and they do want to come to work and they do want to be a competent and highly skilled engineer. I don't know if we have any questions at this point.
Yes, we do, Donald, so that was a really nice place to stop. There's a question from Anne that asks, what positive steps as an employer are Michelin taking to attract applications for the Modern Apprenticeship programme to females or people from black minority and ethnic backgrounds to increase the uptake by underrepresented groups?
Okay, in terms of where we're at with our scheme, if you like, what we have is an advertising campaign that is run locally annually in various places, and that includes all the schools in Tayside, Angus and north of Fife, saying that applicants with a particular set of criteria are welcomed. In terms of in advance of that, we have I don't know what you would call it, a soft or underlying program with both Dundee and Angus councils and a couple of schools in Fife, where we will do a careers fair in their area. So there's one in the Reed Hall in Forfar, there's one in the Ked Hall in Dundee, etc., where we will have a stand and explain to people of decision-making age that apprenticeship is a group. So that's kind of a more general careers fair. We also, for the last 5 years, have been part of a UK government initiative called See Inside Manufacturing, which people may have heard of. Again, it's engagement with local schools, universities, colleges to say, here is manufacturing, here are all the careers that are available. Part of that is to home in on a modern apprenticeship. To answer the question very specifically, Anne, we haven't done any work to positively to go out to these groups. However, what we are doing is a sort of a low-level campaign, if you like, to say, here we are an employer in the area, we could offer you a career in this, this and this, and the cohort that we are appealing to is the age group of 14 to 20 from Dundee, Fife and Angus. So from that sense, that would be the field that we are picking from. At various of the events, we would purposely put forward as our representative a female ex-apprentice, a female engineer, a female manager, to represent their experience, and that's where we're at. Should we do something more proactive? Possibly. We should be looking at every opportunity all the time. So in terms of if you have experience or ideas of how we could improve on what we do, I would be welcome your thoughts and feedback, and you could give me an email and suggest some things.
Okay, thanks, Donald. There's a couple of really good questions. I think we'll take one from Keith first. Pauline's asked probably a question that requires a little bit of additional info, and I'm finding this fascinating, but we need to let you get through your presentation. But Keith asks, how many applications do you receive for each apprenticeship position?
Can I just answer both questions, because I think we can do that quite quickly. Roughly it's 1 to 100, so we get about 100 applicants for each apprenticeship, so we're getting 600, 700 for 6 apprentices within the Michelin scheme. In terms of what are the specific entry requirements, so out of that 600 applicants, we will look at the best candidates We select them from the academic attainment, their attitude, their interactivity with other apprentices during the recruitment process, an interview, look at the sort of engineering appreciation, core skills. So we get everything from people that have got a high level of academic achievement and could choose to go to university but have chosen not to what I would call vocational engineers who are extremely driven, extremely motivated, want to be an engineer and have done for a long time, and are a strong candidate and meet our criteria. So our criteria is somewhat fluid. They need to achieve a level of core skills, and after that we're not too specific. We have had recently quite a number of people that are choosing a modern apprenticeship again as opposed to going to university because they come out with money as opposed to coming out with debt. Okay, I don't know if that answers those questions. So what's in it for us? It provides us with an engineering pipeline. It's part of our resource planning model. We train young people with the skills and competencies we want for our business. We can't really buy in what we want. Basically, we need somebody that can fix. For our diagnostic technicians that work on shift, they need to be able to weld a bracket back in place and carry out sort of diagnostic programming to using sort of Silamog control systems. So it's the full spectrum of engineering activities on our kit. So we find it better to train people rather than buy it in, because if we buy it in then we have to train them as well. It gives our engineering employees a structured approach to learning and also introduces the idea of on-the-job training and lifelong learning. So a very key part of this is learning from their peers. So when they go into the workplace in third year, they are learning from their peers. So they are learning every time. Technology is being upgraded, it's being introduced all the time. So this idea of lifelong learning and on-the-job training is real and will be with them for the duration of their career. So my final point really goes back to the question that we've just talked about, is we get about 100 applicants for every place, and it's an aspirational apprenticeship in Tayside. So in terms of if we just focus in on why do we train for others, we have the facilities and expertise and we can train. It used to be run as an external company. It's now back within the Michelin fold, and it's part of our sort of corporate social responsibility approach. It allows other people to develop their own succession plan. They don't need to hire our engineers, they don't need to pinch people if they've got their own succession plan going, and we also see it as being part of an important part of the local economy. So to have a sort of a vibrant sector is really important for us. We know that across the country there is a skills shortage. We've got the space, we've got the expertise, and we can make it work. In terms of the funding arrangements for that are pretty straightforward. We receive a grant for each modern apprentice, and then we would also ask the employer to cover costs, so that's materials, textbooks, clothing, that sort of thing. So it's not a profit-making venture. It's very much about, right, how can we use the facilities and people that we've got to try and contribute to the engineering skills shortage that we know that exists. Okay, so in conclusion then, I've talked about the Michelin Modern Apprenticeship Programme, how the activity is tracked and reviewed, how the learning is validated, some of the feedback loops, and then the business case and the advantages of a modern apprenticeship.
You've got competition,
Hopefully
Donald.
this has been a soft sell. A soft sell there. I can imagine what the answer is.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll leave that one there just now. And do you want the final one?
No, let's just go on the. Are there any other sort of questions out there about the presentation this afternoon?
Yeah, there's another question from Keith Donald. You'll see it in the chat box. Have you considered the technical apprenticeship in engineering at SCQF level 8 and 9?
At the moment, where we're at is we have set up our apprenticeship where we want it to be. Okay, that looks at the skills and competencies. The training instructors would be better placed to answer that question. They are considering all the options at the moment of how we can get our people to the competency required the most efficient way. I think, Keith, what I would like to do is to refer that to them and then maybe get back to you, because I wouldn't be able to answer that from a technical point of view. I don't know what that would offer us.